Hey everyone, it's Dr. Mary Barbera here, and I am thrilled to be here. I was invited to do a Facebook Live for you all, and I just joined this group, I think a few months ago, and I have actually learned a lot from your questions and your comments. Most of you here are parents of kids with speech delays. And I started out many years ago, 2 decades ago actually, in 1997, when my firstborn son Lucas was starting with speech delays. Up until the point when he was about 15 months, he had a few words, and he would do little fill-in songs and those sorts of things. So hopefully everyone can hear me. If you are joining me here, if you could type in the comments, that would be great if you can hear me, and if you have any questions. Today I am going to be covering red flags for autism, but more importantly, proven therapy techniques that work with kids with just speech delays, whether they have autism, any autism symptoms or not. Because I told you I started out 2 decades ago as a parent of a child who was showing speech delays, but over the last 2 decades, I've done a bunch of things. I became a board certified behavior analyst in 2003. I wrote a book called The Verbal Behavior Approach: How to Teach Children with Autism and Related Disorders. It really would be helpful if you read my book, The Verbal Behavior Approach. But I have free resources too that you can read, and that would help you. I do have a toddler guide that I think would be really super helpful if you have a young child. The toddler guide is called "Is it Autism, ADHD, or Typical Toddler Tantrums? 3 Things You Can Do Today Instead of Worrying." And I am going to go over the 3 things today. And if you're freaked out by me talking about autism and you're like, I don't even want to hear that word, I was totally in the same boat. My husband, who's an ER physician, mentioned the possibility that Lucas might have autism when Lucas was 21 months old. And I told him I never, ever want to hear that word autism again. And that was back in early 1998 and 2 decades ago. And now I say, I write, I type, I speak, autism a lot. And that doesn't mean that your child has autism. But what I found over the last 2 decades is that, number one, kids with autism can recover from autism, not just like 1%. It was proven back in the late 1980s that up to 47% of kids who are diagnosed and treated aggressively early on can recover from autism. So if you have a child with just speech delays, you basically, in my opinion, need to go into the autism world to find out what the treatment is, and then you need to go back and help your child. Because the more mild the situation, the better. But what I see is that if they have mild symptoms of autism and a speech delay, parents don't want to learn ABA strategies, and they're very effective and very efficient. And my whole thing is that kids with and without autism need the parents to learn what to do. So if you want to download that guide, it's marybarbera.com/toddler. The 3 steps you can do today instead of worrying, which are outlined in more detail in that ebook, is number 1 is no typical milestones. I think the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, has a really good website called Act Early, and it has all the milestones that your child should be reaching, not just talking milestones. When should they sit up? When should they walk with furniture? When should they drink out of an open cup? When should they wash their face? When should they begin to take a shower? When should they want to help brush their teeth? And also, when should they be saying one-word utterances? How many? When should they put 2 words together? When should they be able to soothe themselves after they get upset? When should they begin playing with peers? When should they begin imaginative play? And because it's not, when should they point? Pointing is actually a really big deal. And I didn't know this back in 1998, is if a child can point at 18 months and to not only request things, point with their index finger, not this kind of thing, but if they can point to show you what they want, but also to show you things that interest them, like, which they're saying, look up at the sky, look at the airplane. If I see a child pointing, I am a lot less concerned about autism. Now, if your child is 3 or 4 and pointing, it may have still been really delayed, but and we teach kids how to point in my online course, because I think pointing is a big deal. Pointing is a very nonverbal language skill, very important language skill that we can teach. Just like we can teach kids to talk, we can teach kids to sleep in their own bed through the night, we can teach kids to eat a better variety of diet, we can teach kids how to accept different brands of food. Okay, so the first step is to know the milestones and to see where that falls with your child. So if they are 24 months old, for instance, and you look at the 24-month-old milestones and you're not seeing strong performance, some of the milestones are definitely not there. Then what you want to do is you want to look back at the 18-month milestones listed. And there's a lot of reasons kids could be delayed. Kids could be preemies. Kids could, be sick and, not performing up to their usual. So it's not absolute, but if your 24-month-old isn't doing a lot of the things on the 18-month level, then it's a cause for concern and for further evaluation. That still doesn't mean that it's definitely autism. So step number 2 is, if you see a discrepancy between where they should be and where they are, then I would make a sick appointment with your healthcare provider. In the United States, I know this group was created in the UK, so I'm not sure how many people are from the United States versus UK and elsewhere. But in the United States, there's no well visits between the ages of 2 and 3. So you might have to make a sick appointment to discuss concerns about development. And it's not just expressive language concerns. If you have concerns about their following direction, touching body parts, imitation, play, sleeping, eating, walking, if they're delayed with walking, that could be an issue. So you want to talk to your doctor, or if your child goes to preschool or daycare, talk to them as well. Maybe they can reassure you that besides speech delays, everything else is on track. And that's good information to have. So instead of just eyeballing your child and comparing him to a neighbor child or your nephew or the way your older child acted, go and get some real information about where your child should be. So that free guide is marybarbera.com/toddler. So step 1 is to know your milestones. Step 2 is to check with your doctor and or teacher. And step 3 is to learn about ABA. And one of the biggest things I've learned over the years as both a mom to a son with autism, started out with language delays, and a typically developing son who never had speech delays and never had autism. And as a behavior analyst, working with hundreds of kids with and without autism, is that these techniques work no matter if your child is completely typically developing, has a little speech delay, has a big speech delay, has autism, has any kind of issue. These techniques work. And my techniques are very easy, like get a shoebox, cut a slit in it, then get pictures of family members, one picture of mommy, one picture of daddy, one picture of the dog named Spot, one picture of things the child likes, fruit roll-ups, cookie, grapes, whatever they like, juice. Hold up the picture, say mommy or mama, mommy, 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 and have them put it in the shoebox. They don't have to say the word, they just have to listen to it. So I think one of the biggest techniques I show throughout the course, throughout my online course and throughout my practice, is break things down into one-word phrases. Don't talk in full sentences, like instead of saying, Johnny, let's go up the steps, it's time to get a bath. Not that you can't say that, but if you're really trying to teach Johnny to speak, then saying up, up, up would be better than Johnny, let's go up the steps and get a bath. Because the child will attend to first to 1 and then 2-syllable words and then 3-syllable words and then more phrases. So keep that in mind. So learning about ABA, learning about things that help kids with autism can help your child with speech delays. And I know there are people here who have kids with autism, and a few of you have asked questions. Now, I wrote a video blog recently called "Is it a speech delay or autism?" and I posted that on the group and asked for questions for today's Q&A. So I'm just going to read the questions and I'll answer those. If you have questions, just put it in the comment right here and I will answer any question. Okay, so Shauna said, the tip on your blog about saying one word instead of full sentences is a great tip. I did that with my son when he was behind in speech and it helped immensely. It helped him go from no words to single words. Eventually he had tons of single words and then I worked on 2 words. When he points and says slide, I'd say down slide. If he said drink, I'd say want drink. He's 32 months, speaks in full sentences, has hundreds of words, and no longer qualifies for any services. Speech is always something I'll work on because it's so important. I do a weekly video blog. Some of them are about things like recovery, things like denial. Like I was in denial for a year about my son's autism, and it didn't help him. And so I want to get people out of deniil. You know, their wait lists for autism for an evaluation are months or years long in the United States, and in many parts of the world it's even worse. So I want to get kids evaluated, but even as you wait, you may say, I don't want to deal with autism diagnosis. I don't even want to go there. Find out what we do for kids with autism. My toddler course, for instance, is for parents and some early intervention providers, not many, mostly parents of kids with a diagnosis or without a diagnosis that want to learn easy strategies to get their child talking more, following directions, imitating, playing, eating. You do have to, listen to the word autism. So if it really freaks you out, but I got that advice back in 1999. Some woman told me about kids recovering from autism, and she said, you need to find out what they're doing with kids with severe autism so you can go back and you can treat your son who has speech delays only. Because at the time, that's what Lucas's diagnosis was. So I did, and then the more I started looking at autism, I saw what a spectrum it was, and that my son actually was significantly more impaired than I thought he was. Okay, Sarah said, for children who do have an autism diagnosis and are minimally verbal, have you found that the limited language they have tends to come and go? My son is 3, and he has periods where he uses single words, mans and tax. So mans and tax. So obviously Sarah has read some of my work. My book, The Verbal Behavior Approach, is in 10 languages. It's sold more than 50,000 copies. I've spoken all around the world on the verbal behavior approach, and it's great for kids with language delays. But I explain in there what mans and tax are. Mans are requests, and that's what if kids can request a cookie and get a cookie, that is a man, and that is the most powerful, what we call verbal operant, because there's something in it for them. And then tax are labels, basically, of something you see or hear or smell. So this child, Sarah's son, uses single words, mans and tax often, and then regresses to the point where he's using almost no words, and then returns to speaking his single words more consistently weeks later. This has happened over several phases in his life. Just wondering if you've ever encountered this and what sorts of tips you might have to encourage the language to remain. Thanks in advance, and I'm a big fan of your work. Well, thank you, Sarah. I would say, Sarah, I see what you're saying, and my original consultant said it's kind of like you take 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And kids can get sick, they can need ear tubes, they can be making really good gains in other areas, and but there are techniques like fluency trials where you're not just waiting for your son to talk and to say those words that you haven't heard him say for a week or so. In that case, I'd probably get all the words that he can say, even if it's hundreds, as many words as you can on pictures, and I would have him do like my shoebox program and have him name the things and put them in and have them match these words that he could say, just to keep it fluent. How sometimes when kids are learning addition or multiplication, or reading, they'll carry around ring cards. I like to do it more interactively, where you can use these cards to put in a shoebox, to do matching, to do pointing to even fill in the blank eventually with you sleep in a. So if your son has hundreds of mans and tax and labels and words, he's probably ready for like the next level, and the only way to kind of get to the next level is to do like a more official ABA program, more of assessment and planning and treatment. And since he's 3, you may want to look at my free toddler workshop, which is marybarbera.com/toddler workshop, and consider joining my online course after that if you want to learn more. Because it's great that I'm able to give you tips and tricks here, but in reality, it is a lot harder. You can't just take all these free tips and expect it to be a full ABA program. It's just not going to be. You're going to need something, you're going to need, a real program that is going to, every day, your child's going to be able to make gains. Not just, he can talk, but, so what's the next step for him? And if he's 3, I would ask, is he sleeping in his own bed? If he has any still use of any bottles or pacifiers, we want to get rid of that. I did a blog on getting rid of bottles and pacifiers. That's a big deal, especially for kids that are speech delayed. So how's he sleeping? How's he eating? Are you thinking about potty training? All those things, in addition to when should he be filling in the blanks to songs? Can he, if you say, where do you sleep? Does he know bed? That's an interverbal. That's harder. And you don't want to teach that wrong, incorrectly, because you can really make a mess of language. That's the other important thing over the years I've found is if you don't know what you're doing and you just take this little tip from here and this little tip from here, you can end up making a mess of language, and the language could become rote. Your child could have, issues if you don't build the base first, and then just like I'm not a big fan of teaching carrier phrases and teaching long utterances or having goals like he'll speak in full sentences until he's really speaking well on his own spontaneously one-word phrases, one-word utterances. Because if you start piling on expectations that their language becomes more advanced and more typical, it can often backfire. Okay, so we do have a few questions. My son is now 3 years and 9 months. He can say sentence with 3 or 4 words, but he didn't answer question his teacher told me. He just repeats everything he hears, but didn't make conversation, and asked me to make an evaluation to get him. What is your advice? My advice, he's 3 years and 9 months. My advice would be to download my book, my free ebook called Is It Autism, ADHD, or Typical Toddler Tantrums? marybarbera.com/toddler. Also, you can watch my free 1-hour workshop, marybarbera.com/toddler workshop. And yes, I would make an appointment with your physician. I would look at the milestones from the CDC, and I would see if it's more than conversation, if there are other delays, like with his comprehension. My thought there is it's probably some comprehension issues. Like if I were learning a foreign language, and you said whatever foreign country you're at, and you said ubi. And I was like, ubi, well, that's water. I'm going to need water. Ubi. I'm going to learn that word. And so maybe he knows how to say water or ubi. But now the teacher says, ui owie ubi, which is, let's just say, what do you do with water? Well, he doesn't know what those other words mean. So he might echo ui owie ubi or ubi, because he can echo, and he doesn't have the comprehension. But even kids that are higher functioning and have more language skills, even typically developing kids, we call those interverbals, the answer part to questions. And even typically developing 5-year-olds will continue to struggle with answering elaborate questions. So Mark Sundberg, who is a leader in our field, he uses the example, what do you take to the beach versus what do you wear to the beach? Change one word, changes the whole answer. The other thing is, like, your son might be able to answer, what can you eat? Pizza or cookies or whatever. But then when things get harder, there's more conditional discrimination involved. What do you eat for breakfast? Now it gets harder. What can you eat for breakfast that's warm or hot? Now we need to know eat. We need to know breakfast. Now we need to know hot, cold, warm. Then what do you eat? What do people eat for breakfast that's warm that you don't like? Now we add a negation. And that's where, any typically developing 3-year-old is going to fall apart at one of those stages. So I would look at his other skills, Khaled, and see from the CDC website, see if he's delayed in other areas like play, like imitation, answering questions, and those sorts of things. And I would definitely dive into some of my free resources and consider taking my online course if at the end of those free resources you want to dive deeper. Okay, and I'm butchering your name. I'm sorry. Anyashri, how do I get my speech delayed son to say words in context? He just says words randomly without context. I would get visuals for the words. Like, so if you're talking about cats, or you're talking about pigs that live at a farm, or animals that live in a farm, most of us, even typically developing adults, are more visual learners. But I would pull in visuals as much as possible, whether you buy flashcards, whether you take your own pictures, whether you use an iPad. And I remember I was doing some advanced language for learning, language for thinking programming with a school-age child. And it was really complicated. It was like the dog jumped over the fence. The dog got stuck on the fence. And I'm like, that's a hard thing to picture if you don't have really intact language. So I would get into the habit of keeping an iPad with me, and I would just put dog stuck jumping over the fence. You'd be amazed how many YouTube clips and how many images are available. Very random things. But, animals that live on a farm, seen. And you could probably find a picture online very easily, and you could start to talk to him about different things. But for anybody that's saying random words out of context, I would say that you really need to learn how to do an assessment, make a plan, and intervene at home and advocate so that you really can get a handle on where you need to go next. And my free resources are really the best place I would recommend starting. Okay, so I am getting to be about 20 minutes in. If anybody has any further questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. I'll also be monitoring this thread, so if you watch it after the fact, and want to type in a comment, feel free to do that. As I said in the beginning, if you missed it, I started out with my son Lucas being speech delayed when he was 2. He was diagnosed with autism one day before he was 3, and we started an ABA program for him. And I became a board certified behavior analyst, wrote a book called The Verbal Behavior Approach, and have been on my journey, created 3 online courses for professionals and parents. My mission is to turn autism around for 2 million kids by 2020. Part of that mission is I do believe I have seen in my practice with hundreds of kids, I have seen autism be prevented, autism being treated very aggressively so that we can turn it around very quickly in some cases, not in every case. but I found that these techniques, these proven ABA techniques that work so well for kids with autism, work even better with children with speech delays without autism. So I am on a mission to help you guys in this group to I don't want you to freak out every time you see a post and it might have autism in the title, because really, if you just start watching the free resources, you will learn that there is so much overlap between what I do with kids with autism and what I would do to help babies, toddlers, and preschoolers. That's the best place to start treating it. Your brain is the most what we call plastic and the most moldable and changeable. And if you are waiting and worrying and going to once a week speech or even twice a week speech, there's a lot of time in your child's day where you could be making a total difference and working on increasing language and learning skills and decreasing problem behaviors if your child has any. You can be working on using these proven strategies to improve sleep and eating and getting rid of the bottle and pacifier and getting play skills better and just all these skills. So hopefully you have enjoyed this short live. I'm happy to come back on at another time. Happy to answer your questions if you put them in the comments. For more information to get that free guide, just marybarbera.com/toddler. And I will be in and out of this group frequently over the next couple of days, especially to answer any follow-up questions. So thanks for joining me. Have a great day wherever you are, and I will see you soon.